Okay, Allison, I'm going to just grab a glass of water. I'll be there back in 1 minute. Okay? But at least my Zoom is working. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you, Dr. Esserman.
Oh, my apologies. I was on mute. Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I'll be right there.
Okay, so we will get started in just a minute. And while we are waiting, if everyone would please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from or zooming in from. We're excited to have everyone here today. See lots of familiar names and faces, but also some new ones as well. So we will get started in just a minute, but please do introduce yourself in the chat. And also, if you're new, what brought you to the forum today? And if you have any ideas or questions along the way, feel free to add those into the chat as well.
I'm going to actually move my computer out of the sun here. Oh, go
All
somewhere
right.
else.
Okay, well, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is our September 2024 Wisdom Study Community Forum. We are so excited to have you with us today, and thank you for joining. I know there's a lot of people on from past forums as well, so thanks for being here. If you haven't already, please do introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to see who is here and what brought you here today as well. So I'm Allison Fiscalini. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisdom Study, and my team here at UCSF is the Central Coordinating Office for the trial, and we host these forums once a month. It's the last Monday of every month at 4 o'clock Pacific time. So now that you've registered for this one, you will be in the loop for all future forums as well, and look forward to having you continue to be part of these discussions. So the format for the discussion today, let's make sure I can advance. Does not look like it's moving for you guys, does it?
Nope.
All right, there we go. Okay. So the format for today, so we do want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, your thoughts, your feedback, your ideas. So please enter comments in the chat, raise your hand. You can unmute and speak up during the discussion. If you're not speaking, if you could, though, mute yourself so that there isn't any background noise. We are recording the meeting, and these all get saved to our website and our YouTube channel so that those who were not able to join can go back and listen to the forum at another time. We also have a short post-meeting feedback survey that we'd love to have you fill out as well. So we've been hosting these forums for the last several years, really with the mission of moving together toward equity, better outcomes in breast cancer for everyone, and really being able to engage our community in a dialogue around women's health, breast cancer, screening, prevention, and all topics in those general areas. So we welcome you and look forward to a great discussion today. We have a whole host of recorded sessions from prior forums on our YouTube channel. We'll stick that in the chat. You can see lots of topics ranging from risk factors to risk models to overviews of breast cancer in certain populations. So we are excited today to actually do a little bit of a dive behind the scenes of wisdom screening recommendations and do some examples of why someone might get a certain screening recommendation over another in the study. And as we've discussed, there are several risk factors for breast cancer, and one of our goals is to try and take into account as many risk factors as possible when we're assessing someone's individual risk. And so we'll hear today how some of these risk factors that are listed on the slide are used and incorporated into the Wisdom Study personalized screening recommendations. So without further ado, we are going to launch off. We have Dr. Laura Esserman here, as well as Dr. Deborah Goodman, who's one of our Wisdom Breast Health specialists. They are both leading efforts in the Wisdom Study, both to help to define our risk thresholds and our models, but also to help explain and communicate risk back to our study participants. And so we just wanted to start off with an analogy. And so I will pass this off to Dr. Esserman.
Well, hi, everybody. I am wanting to talk to, before you put that up, let me explain first.
Yeah.
And just say, I understand. So one of the hardest things about screening is that when you think about screening, it is something that you do, it's really a public good. It's also something that you do individually. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with this. Why wouldn't I just screen all the time? Why wouldn't I want to just do the most? Why should I do less? Because if I have a cancer that's missed, therefore I have harmed myself by not being screened, which actually turns out not to be true necessarily. Or if I did screen and it caught something, then that justifies that I screened, that therefore it's a life saved. It's a hard concept to understand, but every cancer detected is not life saved. Screening reduces the relative chance of dying by 20%-ish, in that range. So of screen detected cancers, that overall screening rate is somewhere in the outcomes are 10 to 20% mortality. So the absolute difference is maybe 2 to 4%, depending on how big your cancer is when you are found, right? So part of the problem is that treatments are increasingly effective, so that negates some of the benefit of screening. And most of the benefits we've made have come from treatments, improvements in treatments. And part of the negative things about screening is, you can get a callback, which is stressful. You can get a biopsy, which is even more stressful. You can be told that you have atypia or DCIS and very much get overtreated. Or you can have a small, low-risk cancer that's treated aggressively that maybe you didn't need, and more treatment that you need. And treatments can cause other consequences down the road. So there is a host of things that can go wrong. And I think part of this is it's very hard to understand. Now, in this in the setting of colon cancer screening, we use polyp, and this is a very effective screening tool, by the way. If you have polyps, you're told to come back in 5 years. If you don't have polyps, you're told to come back in 10 years. Now, it is rare for someone to say, oh, I demand to come back next year or the year after. Nobody really wants to come back for another colonoscopy. But this is very similar. So I'm concerned in particular with the way people are thinking about screening. So for example, there's a bill working its way through the Congress that says detected better. And it is mimicking some of the state laws that we have that says if you have dense breast tissue, everyone should be able to get an ultrasound and have it covered with no copay, which will dramatically increase the incidence of the use of that. And ultrasound screening is actually not a very effective screening test. And most women, 60% of women in their 40s have dense breast tissue, and 50% of women and 50 and older have dense breast tissue. So that's a very blunt instrument. And it's not true that screening mammography is ineffective. And part of the problem is that if we put all of these resources into going after things that don't help us, we're spending billions of dollars in a direction that's not advancing the field and helping us. There are tools coming online that really tell us who among the people with dense breast tissue maybe have more risk, and maybe that's 10%. But the tools that we should be using for that are MRI. So let me try an analogy, and then I want to have a discussion with everybody and see if they can understand, if this helps them understand, so what the issue is. So, okay, now let's take the first slide. So let's imagine we're in Michigan. And in fact, I was at a luncheon today for the women running for important Senate House seats all over the country. And I met the woman who represents Flint, Michigan. She says they have actually already replaced the pipes, all the pipes. But let's just imagine, in the context of this water crisis, let's just say our goal is to replace all of the lead pipes in Michigan, all of them. And so you could have two strategies. One strategy would be to go house by house across Michigan and go in and investigate the pipes in each house to find out if they have lead in them. Now, the other strategy could be a more risk-based approach, where you go after the houses that have the highest possible chance of having lead in them. So let's play out both scenarios. Next, let's go on to the next one. So if we went statewide, and then let's just say that we break open the pipes in every single home that we go to and test for lead. So after spending our 15 million, we will have gotten through 60% of the houses, 3 of the 5 million homes that we have to look in. And how many lead pipes were found? We found 300,000 lead pipes. So we found 10% of the people who had them. We spent all the money and 10%. Now, the people whose pipes were tested feel very confident that they don't have lead. Now, the downside is that we had a lot of people experience a disruption in their homes, 3 million people, right? And, you think about this, 75% of the recalls and the biopsies that we do are not cancer. So we do a lot of this disrupting. So there are 40% of people live with the anxiety from no testing because we never got to those houses. And it was a pretty big cost and more effort going to people who weren't at risk to begin with. And of the 300,000 found and removed, 36,000 were found not to have lead, so false positive rate of 12%, leading to some anxiety and expense and inconvenience. Now let's look at the more risk modeled. We want to take into account when the house was built, what year the pipes were laid, and what they were made with, and look for lead in the water. The low-tech screening results, the home water tests, are not very disruptive. That's a good way to start. And with 10 billion of the 15 billion that we set aside, we were able to identify 20% of the houses. And so of the self-test screeners, there was, we did a good job. So it was no real cost to the 80% of the houses. We found 850 houses that had lead pipe in them, had lead in them. We disrupted 1 million people's homes. So we found that was a yield of 85%, not 10%. And we have the resources to screen everyone. The high-risk pipes could get confirmatory testing faster. We improved the yield a lot. And we didn't miss the people who really needed it, those most at risk. The homeowners were given actionable options for home tests. And the health department had some leftover tests and resources to be able to do more work. Now, there's some downside is there's some anxiety for people who were not recommended further testing. Maybe they didn't just trust the model. But I think what I'm trying to show is that we all take an individual look. But when you think about when you're screening a population, it's we don't want to be putting all of the effort into the people who are screening. In this country, 65% of people are screened, about anywhere 65 to 70. That's a full 30% to 35% of people who are not getting screened. Do we know that we are not getting the people? I mean, we don't know anything about the people who are being screened and whether they should be screened. Part of my problem with, it is true that if you are told not to screen in your 40s, is it possible that you will get a cancer in your 40s? It is true. But one of the most important things is that 50% of women today find their own cancers. They are not screen detected. So it is really important for us not to forget that you have to be vigilant, and screening is not the only way to detect cancers. The high-risk, fast-growing cancers tend not to show up on screening exams because they grow between screens. Lobular cancers sometimes just don't show up until they're bigger. Sometimes they do. It's important to know your own body and to go in and do things. But I'm asking people to understand that when we do a test like Wisdom, and we're trying to say, look, now our tests are not perfect, and our risk assessments are not perfect, but they're a whole lot better today than they were before. One of the reasons we're doing the genetic tests is to say, well, we want to really make sure that we find the people who have an 85% lifetime risk of getting cancer. We have an imperative to find these people and make sure that they are aware and can screen more frequently. And for the people who have a minimal risk, like these people over here, we can leave them alone a little bit more. That does not mean that no one in that group will get a cancer. It doesn't mean that. We're not perfect. But we have to be making some choices here about what we want to spend our effort, the efforts of our trained physicians, and how we want to move the field forward. So I'd like to open it up for discussion. Is there another slide, Allison? I think yeah. So we can think about it the same way. If you have a 40-year-old woman whose mom was diagnosed with breast cancer at 55, but she has no mutations, there's no palpable finding, there's no mass, right? You've got to have that. And she has an extremely low polygenic risk score. Now she's worried based on her family history, should she start screening now? Well, she has no mutations. The chance of a miscancer is low. She's young and a low polygenic risk score. It's a low yield. Her chance of screening in the 40s, you have the highest chance of false positives. If later you notice a change, of course, you have to go in. But I think it's important to say that again, these are not perfect tests, but it's about trying to figure out who needs what and when, and to do the most good for the most people. So focusing resources on high-risk individuals, I think, is really crucial for improving our healthcare outcomes. And we have to think about time and money on outdated methods. It dilutes impact and overburden screening facilities. To say that everyone should get a screening ultrasound because they have dense breast tissue, this might increase your yield by 1%. We actually looked at the data through the Optum database on 1 million women. An ultrasound increased the yield by 1% and doubled the cost of screening. And there's a 90% false positive rate. That is a really high price to pay when there's so many better things that we could be doing. And especially because then people aren't paying attention to the people who are at highest risk. that need it. So I'd like to get people's feedback on this kind of an explanation, whether it's helpful to understand why we feel strongly um, about wanting to limit things like, screening ultrasound for people with dense breast tissue. What we should be doing is trying to work on implementing these new tools with, AI for tomosynthesis and identifying the 10% of people who need more, and to do a more expensive, better test, MRI, and on the right people. So comments and thoughts from people.
Hi, this is Parisa from Los Angeles. Thank you so much. I think one thing that, as a person who is dealing with this issue, is going to be very helpful is to have real concrete guidelines. So it's kind of the criteria are available to all the practitioners and physicians, and people actually can realize where they stand in this risk spectrum, and do they need extra screening or not.
Well, Parisa, thank you. The whole reason we're doing the wisdom study is to generate better data. I think that one of the mistakes we've made in screening is we just keep doing more and more of the same, and we haven't improved our way of doing things. So the wisdom study is all about trying to do this more intensive screen so that everybody, you can choose when you join the study to get personalized or just annual screening. We would encourage everybody to be on the personalized arm. It comes with genetic testing, and we'll give you that information. Do you have one of those very high risk genes? Do you additionally have you inherit this set of genes, polymegenic risk, that contributes to a higher risk, where we should be keeping a closer eye on you? Or is it really a lot lower so we can do less? We have very explicit guidelines in the study for what you should follow. And we hope people will follow them. They don't always. But we're trying, I think part of the problem is it's hard for people to understand why we would ever screen less. And that's what I'm trying to find a way to explain it, to help people understand. Diane, I see you shaking your head. Let me hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean that's been the issue from day one,
right?
Because
right.
we've all been told to screen. We've all been told to screen early and often. We've all been told that that's the way to avoid a breast cancer. So we're going against, decades, right, of
Right.
pink information.
Does this analogy, is it helpful or not really?
Yeah.
That's not incredibly convincing.
Hello,
Um,
Dr. Esserman. My name is Michelle Rakoff, and I am an advocate on the Wisdom from Los Angeles. I like very much what you had to say. It's very, very difficult for people that are not familiar with breast cancer and screening to really understand it. I just wanted to bring to your attention, I myself am a survivor of over 30 years, and I've worked in the clinic. There's a very nice, interesting article on the cover of Cancer Letter that just came out, talking about the quandary of dense breasts. So I think, it's something that people might want to read, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because we have no idea what it means and what to do.
Exactly. And so I am when I found out about this bill going through Congress mandating something that is really not going to help us, why don't they support a whole bunch of, instead of spending $5 billion on stuff that's not going to help. Why don't we put like 20 million or 50 million and to a bunch of studies to try and help us figure out which of these tools will work and then to really work on implementing. The good news is that tomosynthesis, whether you think it's a good idea or not, has actually pretty much been adopted across the country. 85–90% of sites actually use it. But that comes with the ability to apply these tools to say, there's an algorithm that was published a couple of years ago that says, whoa, here's 10% of people who have high risk for getting cancer in the next year. The Murray model, there's a couple of these other things that we're actually going to try and introduce too. And I think if we don't work on developing and pushing these forward, then people are going to use the old stuff because they're nervous about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's incumbent upon us to push the field forward faster, right?
Laura, yep. Laura, there was a hand up by Kokoye.
Kokoye. Yeah, Kokoye, you want to say what you wanted to say? Yeah, there you are.
Well, what I was going to say is that all sounds pretty good intellectually, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I find that persuasive. I think the thing I think as a Black woman, and Black folks have systematically been given unequal medical treatment, that I would it makes me feel a little bit better that maybe I'm going to get what I need. If there's a bill that says, everybody who has, and I have dense breast, you're going to get this. I think that if there was an investment by hospitals and clinics to have someone, a medical person, sit down and talk to us women in a certain age group and explain this very thoroughly, I think that there might be folks who would say, well, really that does kind of make sense. But I'm going to say, I am a product of my time,
Of course.
and I'm just not that convinced
All right.
that it would be fair.
So let me tell you one of the things that frustrates me about this issue. So, and my friend Fumi Olopade and I have talked about this time and again. So part of what happened with the guidelines now is one of the reasons why they said, okay, all women should start screening at 40 and screen every other year. And part of the reason is because Black women have a higher mortality rate from breast cancer. What I would say is, it's not that every Black woman, nor does every white woman need to be screened starting at 40. But we have to do a good job of finding the people at risk. Because if you have higher risk, you need to be screened more frequently. If you are at risk for a fast-growing cancer, like a triple negative cancer, which is more common in African American women, you should be screened every 6 months, and you should be screened alternating with MRI and mammogram. And screening once every 2 years is probably not going to do you any good. And this is one of the things that frustrates me, that, a blanket rule, okay, everybody gets this, and that's going to be the solution, to me, isn't the solution. The solution is to really, all women have a 1 to 2% chance, in particular, of having a very high-risk situation. I think all women should start with that. That's what we're trying to do on the wisdom study. And then along with that, we want to look at the genes. Now we actually, fortunately, Dr. Olopade and actually some others actually have come up with a polygenic risk score specific to African American women that can identify people at higher risk. Okay, and that's like 5%, maybe another 5% of women, where we can do more. Now, we could be wrong about that. But again, that's about the lead pipe analogy. We have things that we can do. And density is one of those issues, but it is not the only issue. And the word dense is broadly defined of half the population. And it isn't true that mammography doesn't work in half the population. I mean, in extremely dense breast tissue, it may be less effective, but that's not dense BI-RADS C and D. You know, if anything, it should be limited to only the people with very dense breast tissue. But that's something we take into account in wisdom when we're trying to come up with our screening recommendations and how often we should be following you. You know, we know that screening ultrasound is actually a pretty lousy tool. Anyway, let me go back to you about that. Do you understand that why? I mean, I don't know that I have a better way to explain that, but it's like we want to go and say, oh, well, let's just do a mammogram every other year and we'll all feel good about it and assume that that's going to do the trick. 40,000 women a year are still dying of breast cancer, despite that screening. I think we can do better. We have to do better. More of the same. I mean, screening contributes a small amount, and most people think it's much bigger than it is. I'm trying to make it so that it is better. You know, and excuse me. I agree with you. I agree. We have not done enough for African American women. You know, Carrie, I 100% agree with you. And that's one of the reasons we have worked so hard to make sure that we have adequate representation. You know, when we started, we were 2 years into the study, we had 1.7% African American women, and we now are at close to 30%. Because, you know, no participation, no representation. And it is true that a lot of the research has been done on women of European ancestry. So we haven't had the tools to figure out who's at risk in the African American community. But Melissa Davis, Fumi Alapade, a number of others have been working hard at this, and now we have some tools. And we have ways to really look specifically for more risk. Are they perfect? They're not. But they're better than just giving someone, okay, start every other year and just do the same for everyone. I don't think that's good enough. Does that help at all, Carrie? It's a really hard issue and it's a hard thing to explain. And, you know, and I think a lot of people say, well, I just want to get my mammogram. Okay, well, I'm like, wow, can we do better than that?
Yeah, if I can just offer something, it's not that it's difficult to understand, it's just that so many of the resources have been going to the people who don't look like me or don't look like Akoya for so many decades. I mean,
Yes.
that's why I wanted her to explain what she was talking about. Do you mean the time during segregation or during segregation or what? And she means the systematic racism that's gone on since this country started also lends itself to the healthcare profession, so-called. The fact that so many people, particularly black women, particularly younger black women, I was working a few years ago, and there was a 23-year-old black woman working for one of my prime contractors who died of breast cancer. And she happened to be, I forget what ethnic group she was and what that West African country she was, but that particular group had a higher incidence than others. Why aren't we focusing? Why is it taking so long? And it's because of this structural racism and the systematic non-interest in people of color. So we can't just shrug our shoulders. I want, a line in the sand to say, okay, it's been happening. So why don't we have more outreach to some of the medical professions that have more Blacks in them, or more Latinas in them, or more people of African descent? Are you
Well,
reaching out to
so please help us, right? We have what I think, what is it? 39% non-white enrollment
Okay,
in the
that's
trial
good
in
to
the
hear.
last
That's
year.
better than 2 years ago.
No, no,
I
I
have
mean,
already,
we have systematically improved it, but we are, part of the reason we have this, we want your help. We want to reach out to those communities. If you can help us, because we know that we have to, we don't want to just have, we are double right now the representation in the country. We know that that's what we need to do to make sure that we can make sure to make up for and get more data on this population who really does have a higher risk of breast cancer, to understand better, to test some of these new tools to find out we think that we have something that will help us identify these people at higher risk, to bring them in and screen them more frequently. And the only way for us to know is to test it. But the only way for us to test it is to make sure that people believe that this is a test, that this is a study for them, and that they want to be part of generating the data. I mean, exactly to your point, we are trying to make sure that we don't run another big study and leave a generation of women and a particular race of women out.
okay, I just dropped into the chat because I don't see it. There's no Q&A. The Black Women's Health Imperative, I don't have any direct relationship with them other than getting their emails, but I'm assuming your group has already reached out to them, as well as the couple of Black medical colleges.
Yeah, so we have one of our partners is going to be now Morehouse. That's
Okay.
where Melissa Davis is.
What about Meharry?
We haven't reached out to Mahari yet, but Mahari is, we could if you know somebody there.
I would do the Google thing just as you would. I'm not a healthcare professional, so I
Okay.
hoped,
Yep.
my sister just said Charles Drew, right in Los
Yep.
Angeles. I mean, I shouldn't have to point to a healthcare professional where to go look for this information, but I will help
Oh,
if
it
you
is,
need.
I mean, it's not quite that simple. You have to find, we are working really hard. And I mean, it's not an accident that we have such a high enrollment now. We've been working extremely hard, but we want to keep working harder. And we have partners. You have to cultivate people who are in communities and who are interested and who will work with you. And, we partnered with the VA. The VA has been a great partner, and they have a very diverse population. We have partners in Chicago, partners in Alabama, partners in Miami. We have, plus we've tried to make this a pitch across the country to say that this is a trial for you. And so what we're saying is, sometimes the best way for people to find out about the study is to find out about it from people who are in the study or who know about the study, and to tell their friends, right? And,
You have interns or something who can help you do the research? I don't have any staff. I'm sure the
No, of
group
course.
does.
No, we do all that. I'm just saying,
Okay. All right.
but you can tell your friends, right?
Yeah.
You can, as someone, I'm just saying, or, I mean, we are doing that. That's how we've made this change. But anybody who's interested, or anybody who wants to talk about it, or talk about it on their social media and say, hey, I'm in this trial, or I want to recommend this trial, I think it's important that we all participate. I mean, one of the double-edged swords about this too, though, is that people who've been left behind also then are distrustful of the system. So then people are distrustful of any so-called study and wondering, are you really serious about it? So we're also trying to let you know we're really serious about it, and we know it's an issue, and we're trying to make sure that we do reach out. And, we see sometimes too that, when we identify people at risk, it's sometimes harder. We have to work harder to make sure that we reach out to the people who, from every ethnicity and every race, to make sure that they, get the information. I noticed there was a comment about what is BIRAD. So,
Laura,
so
I actually have a visual of what density looks like if you'd like me to show it real quick.
That'd be great.
And also just, I know Marion has her hand up too before we shift topics.
Marion?
Hi. Uh, with this legislation, do you in wisdom have a way of actually reaching out to the legislators and saying, hey, you're putting all this money here, but look at what we're doing and where we think the money should go instead? I find when I talk to people, they get so confused about the option, if they know about the options at all. I mean, so they have no information or marginal suspect information and not person-centered information.
Yep.
And that's why I like the wisdom study. I just, that's how I'm saying that to people that I talk about. This is patient-centered. You are the person that's being looked at, and you will get results and information based on you, not just some broad group. In addition to whatever you feed into the system is going to help everyone. But it is very small amount compared to the amounts of money and time that you're talking about being spent to put in this legislation that you're saying
Exactly.
isn't going to give us any good.
Well, I
Yeah.
went to a lunch downtown today where Representative Anna Eschy was there. She leads the health subcommittee. And I made sure to go talk to her today. And we're going to be able to talk to her and go in and make sure that people understand what the issues are. So there's a way in which people measure how much dense breast tissue you have. And this is a tool that's been used for 30 plus years. So very fatty breast on the left here. We call scattered fibroglandular densities, or BI-RADS 2. BI-RADS 3 is heterogeneously dense, meaning patchy density, and D is extremely dense. So maybe 10%, at the most 15% of women have extremely dense breast tissue. But another 40% of people have heterogeneously dense breast tissue. And while it's true that as a group, the more density you have, the more risk you have, everybody in this category of dense breast tissue does not have high risk. And so to use a tool like ultrasound that has an extremely high false positive rate is not effective. What you want to know is if, in fact, you are one of these people in this group where your risk is high, because it's not just density. We've learned now that's kind of too crude a measure. And you can identify 10 or 15% of these people who need it. That's what we're trying to do with this combination of breast density, polygenic risk, genetic risk, other factors that all together that we can really stratify people's risk. So if you have an extremely low risk of getting cancer, that doesn't mean that you have zero chance of getting breast cancer. But that may be, instead of having a 13% or 12% chance of getting breast cancer over your lifetime, which is the average person, you might have a 2 or 3% risk, which is really, really low. And you might have a 25% or 35 or 55. For sure, we don't want to miss the people at that high risk. And the people at the low risk probably can do a lot less, and they'll have a lot less workup or chance of a biopsy or chance of overdiagnosis. That was the point that I was trying to make, is that we can do better than this. And that's what we're trying to do in the wisdom study. And it's free and it's open to everybody.
So quickly, Trisha has her hand up. She has a question.
Hi, Dr. Esserman. I have a question about weighing the different risk factors and how you consider that at both a population level and an individual level.
So that's an excellent question. So models, for the population level, we build these big models. And so like we use the Breast Cancer Surveillance Consortium, for example, and it's based on 1 million women. And so we collect all of these, there's a whole group of investigators that work really hard to collect information on everybody. And they build these models and they keep trying to improve things, right? To try and figure out how each one of these contributors adds to breast cancer risk model. They're now on Breast Cancer Surveillance Consortium Model 3. Now they know that weight is one of the things that can contribute. It includes breast density, includes family history, and sometimes your lifestyle factors. So when you started your periods, when you ended your periods, how many children you had, and how old you were when you had it. Those are all factors that we take from society, and then we ask ourselves, okay, how does that work? So you can then take these and say, well, does it really work for the individual? So it might be, oh, here's a risk factor, and you can find the people in the highest risk versus lowest group, but it doesn't work necessarily so well on the individual level. That is something that we have really moved the needle on by trying to add in more and more sophisticated ways of looking at people's genetics, plus the density. And we want to improve the way we look at density. I think it's an imperative that we do that. We have to do better for everyone. And so what we're looking for are the tools that it's not that it just works on the population level, but it works on the individual level. It's like going in, with the, imagine where that first, that's like, when was your house built? When were the pipes made? What's the water look like in the house? Those are the things, that's what comes into in the individual. Are you someone at risk that should be screened, or where we should be doing more? And that's the idea. Yeah, so it is a very good question that there used to be something called the Gale risk. That was the first breast cancer risk model. And it's okay, but it's only helpful for the individual if you're at the very high end or the very low end. So some of the tools and the models that have been developed since that time actually are much better for predicting for each individual how much risk they have.
I think
And
one of my
that's,
questions is, participant in the study, do I have greater risk because of my genetic profile, or is it my weight or my alcohol intake or I know they're all contributors, but how do you balance the relative impact of making improvements in certain areas?
Well, the good news is you have access to your own individual risk assessment tool. And there your information is actually in there. And you can also request, if you want, to go over that information with Deborah Goodman or one of our, Deborah, say hi. And
Sorry, hi.
yeah. And so, if you want to understand that for each person, Allison, so like everybody has access to the Breast Health Decisions tool, where it goes through and tells you, here's some things that you could do that might improve your risk. And you can do it on your own, or you could ask for, if we think you're at higher risk, we reach out to you. But you can also request a consultation if you want to go over
And I
that.
think just to clarify too, Laura, that the weighting of each of the risk factors is sort of part of the model development and validation, and is part of the work that's done across those 1 million women who are part of the cohort. So I think it's within the model, the weighting is happening. So every factor sort of weights differently. And we could bring that up and explain that a little bit more based on just the BCSE inputs. But I think they also weight slightly differently depending on if you have one answer over another, if that makes sense.
We could actually ask Jeff Tice to come and talk what goes into building a breast cancer model. Would
Yeah.
people be interested in that? That could be a good topic.
There was also a question about if something is found on a mammogram and you require extra screening, is an MRI or an ultrasound better for heterogeneously dense breasts?
Well, I think it depends on what you found. Sometimes it's just you can't quite tell what's going on, and an MRI may be better. If you have a mass or there's something that you can identify on mammogram, ultrasound is the ideal tool to try and see if you can find it because ultrasound's a good diagnostic tool. It's great for that. So if you see a mass or something that you're
Sorry,
concerned
what's the
about.
question?
So the question is,
I don't know if you.
oh, go ahead.
I think that may have been an accidental unmuting.
Oh, okay. But like, let's just say that on the mammogram, you see something abnormal and you see a mass. And you know it's like 3 o'clock in the right breast, somewhere about 4 centimeters from the nipple. You can go in with ultrasound and see if you can see it. And if you can, then you can biopsy it very easily. That's the best use of ultrasound. It's great for that. But if there's some kind of asymmetry and you think there's something abnormal, you really can't tell. An MRI may be the right thing to do to make sure that there isn't something else going on. Or maybe the tissue is extremely dense, in which case you don't want to use sound waves or because ionizing radiation or sound waves, it's the same thing. If it's very dense, it bounces off. But if you're looking by MRI, it's a completely different way of looking at breast tissue. So you're looking at the blood flow. So you're looking to see how fast does something take up tissue, contrast material. That's actually what makes tumors stand out. And that's why MRI can be so helpful and diagnostic in that way. But of course, one of the downsides of MRI is that it has a lot of false positives. If you're very high risk or you have something really abnormal, that's of course worth the trouble. But you don't want to do it indiscriminately. Does that make sense? Can people understand that explanation? And, that's, if you are at high risk, let's just say you've inherited an error in DNA repair, that's BRCA1 or BRCA2 or PALP2 or one of those. We know that things can grow quickly and they can start quickly, that you really want to be screening every 6 months. So we alternate getting a mammogram once a year and an MRI once a year. There are people who think maybe it's better to do an MRI twice a year, and that's being tested in our colleagues in Chicago. If that were true, then that's what we should do. But we figure that there's more than one test that can provide important information. Even if your tissue is dense, calcifications will show up. If you have a whole swath of new calcifications, that's risky. That's something we worry about. And it's true whether you have dense, and you can see it if you have dense breast tissue or not.
So Laura, we have about 5 minutes left. We had a bunch of different scenarios of wisdom recommendations that we didn't get to, but I think we could do a little teaser and just say these are the types of questions we get, and we'd love to hear what questions you have because our goal is to create these scenarios that wisdom participants or people considering participating can kind of understand how we make the recommendations and why we may recommend one thing over another. So I can quickly go through what some of those commonly asked questions are, and we can share this as well. Our plan is to post it on our website and to be able to create more scenarios and more explanations to get people familiar with how all of this information fits together. So
let's do that. And also tell people how they access the breast health decisions tool in their portal.
Yes. So it is available. The Breast Health Decisions tool is available to participants in the personalized arm. And it's available to people who do not have a genetic mutation. We're updating it to include the genetic risk information, but it does not include that at the current moment. We are also updating it to include risk information for women under 40. So those are the two changes that are forthcoming. So anyone in the personalized arm right now without a genetic mutation and who's over the age of 40 should have access to the tool. And it is when you log into your portal, there's a quick links bar on the left, and it says, I think it says personalized risk assessment tool, or Deborah, if you recall what it means, something along those lines.
It says new : breast risk assessment tool.
Yeah, so the name tool is in there too. So just quickly, just to sort of get people's thought processes going. And again, we'd love to collect other scenarios of questions that you have, but these are some common questions that we get. So the first one is, I have a strong family history, but my color genetic testing results from the Wisdom study show no mutations or polygenic risk. Why is Wisdom recommending that I don't need to screen as frequently? Doesn't my family history matter? So that's one type of question. And we'll go through a scenario of someone who, the age of a family member is important, whether the family member is a first degree or a second degree family member is important, but also genetic testing is intentional to test your hereditary risk. And so if a genetic test is saying that you don't have breast or have a breast cancer related gene or your genetic risk, it's a pretty good indication that that may have not been passed down to you. It's not entirely its own explanation, but it is a pretty good indication.
But for example, if there's a known mutation in the family and you do not have it, you do not have the risk that your family has. If there's no known mutation, sometimes it can be helpful to test other members in the family so you understand how important that is. And that's one of the great things about genetic testing. If someone has it in the family, other family members either have it or they don't. And it can be really very reassuring that you don't carry that same risk the other family members do. But if you had, two relatives that got it in their 80s, that's actually not really a family risk. That's just extremely common. Okay.
So another one is, I have no genetic mutations and no family history, but was told I have high polygenic risk. Why do I need to screen more? And will my doctor order more tests for me based on my polygenic risk? So again, these are all the different reasons that your risk factors could bump up or down. Polygenic risk is one of the several factors that we assess.
And it's not that, and what we would also like to do, the great thing about the polygenic risk tools is it can be helpful to us to understand what kind of cancer you might be at risk to develop. If you're at risk to develop a hormone-positive breast cancer, we might say, wow, you might be someone who would be a great candidate to take baby tamoxifen and reduce your risk. And it may or may not be something, you may have a long family, long-term family risk, but it may be not in the next 5 years. But if you take something when you're young, that benefit continues to accrue for 10 years. So that's why, yeah.
And then one more, and then we'll send these and make them available. We'd love to get comments and additional questions that we can elaborate on. One that's here is, I've read that Black women should get screened at younger ages than women of other races and should consider starting mammograms under 40. Why is Wisdom telling me not to start screening yet? So this would be a Black or African American woman who joined the study under the age of 40.
And we know that breast cancer is not more common in Black women. It's just that there are certain types of cancers that are riskier, and they're riskier if you do get breast cancer. So in the same way that other people have high risk or low risk, we want to find all the Black women who are at high risk that should be screening more, but not necessarily screen everyone or make everybody start, because that's like, you know, what I often will hear is, oh, I have Jewish ancestry, so I should screen more frequently. Like, no, that's not true. Jewish women were the first population that we found like BRCA1 and BRCA2 in, and we found that they're founder mutations, and but it's only present in 1 to 2%. So just because you're Jewish doesn't mean that you have a high family history or that you're at high risk for breast cancer. It means that you could, but that risk of having a mutation is still only about 2%. So everyone doesn't need to screen early, only the people who have that particular mutation. Does that make sense? So that's what we're trying to say as we start to also define, you know, strong family history, polygenic risk specific to African American women, et cetera, extremely dense breast. These are the things that can increase our certainty that you're someone who would benefit from screening. But not all women who are Black have risk. We're trying to go with the risk-based approach.
Okay, I know we are over time. So again, those were just very brief examples of what we're hoping to develop into a more comprehensive library of scenarios and explanations of why people may be placed in certain screening recommendations than others, and some of the supporting evidence that goes behind it. So we are hoping that we can get your input and see if there are other scenarios that you'd like to hear about as well. In the chat, you'll see a link to a survey. We'd love to have you fill that out. Let us know feedback on this forum. You can also add in there feedback on these types of scenarios that you may want to see. We can create a simple document and send it out to the attendees who came to the forum today with the scenarios that we already have listed, and you're welcome to provide feedback and suggest some new ones as well. So our next forum is actually October 26th. We will soon be moving to an expanded genetic testing panel in the Wisdom study. And so we will have our one of our genetic counselors, as well as someone from Color Health, come to talk to the group about what the new expanded hereditary cancer panel means, both for current and future Wisdom participants. We should be shifting to that new test sometime in mid-October, so this will be a timely discussion, and hope everyone will join us.
And Hazel, I want to thank you for the information you put in the chat. We'll definitely reach out to you. And yes, we definitely agree that I think the faith-based churches are really an important resource for us. And, you know, we're looking, you know, to try and do more of that with this. We just got funded for this next, you know, effort. We've actually are putting in for some resources to expand our outreach efforts. And I think that's a good thing. I want to make sure that I do that also in the Bayview and Hunters Point, and you know, here locally. You know, there's just so much to do, and I feel remiss that I haven't had enough of an effort to go out and do that. But that's something that we really hope to do. And we've worked with Barbara Lee and her council in Oakland, and we've tried to go through the Black sororities also, and we've made lots of pitches there. So, but it is really, it is really absolutely true that, you know, that it is, and we actually have, I've just trained a breast cancer surgeon who's both an OBGYN and a genetic counselor, and she's African American, and she's going to be doing a lot of outreach for the next year with us on the Wisdom study. And it is absolutely true. I feel like, you know, I am an, you know, I'm obviously very passionate about this, and I'm a good spokesperson, you know, but I'm white, and I really want to partner with my colleagues who are African American, and they're the right voice to reach out. You know, I'm
That's
trying
correct.
because of
Yeah.
them. You know, my partner, my Cheryl Ewing, who's been is African American, my longtime partner in surgery. When I go out to give talks, she goes with me. I'm much more trusted if she introduces me.
That's right. Yeah, it does
And-
make a difference. We have to use trusted,
Right.
trusted community members, and
And I
I
totally
know
understand.
physicians are, yeah.
Yeah, and I totally understand why. And I agree with you that we have to reach out. The last 2 years, we've really, we've had the last 4 years, we've trained at least one of our two fellows has been a woman of color. And, I am really paying attention to that. I agree totally. And I also think, one of the things, I'm sorry to go over, but I have also noticed that in our breast health consultations, we're not as good at getting women who are African American to accept counseling or to a conversation. And what I wanted to do is we're trying to build this cadre of people who,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's Latina, someone who's Black, someone who's white,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's Asian, and have them on the website, and the people can
Mhm.
choose who they want to talk to.
Right.
I don't know if that will help,
I
but I
think it,
think it
I think
will.
it will. Yeah. I mean, I know that, for instance, Shepherd's Manor, which is in Los Angeles, uh, Pastor Rhonda is how I even found out about the wisdom study. I think that's how I
Right.
found out about it. So she's, very well known in the Southern California community, and just having someone who you can trust. I mean, because
Right.
there's a lot of false information out as well. So
Yes.
yeah, having choices and a person saying, "Oh," because I would be more apt to select someone who's African American. That's just me, and I think it's generational as well. And I think it is, but research also shows that it makes a difference, at least for
I think everyone is just more comfortable with people who look like them.
yes, very
That's
much
not,
so.
and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if that's true, we want people to be comfortable.
Mhm.
And we want people to understand that we care about them and want to do what we can to make them feel comfortable using the information that we have to offer.
Thank you. And then Allison said that she'd be in touch with me,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's
I
it.
will.
Thank
And
you.
I also, on this topic, have to give a big shout out to Marion Harris, who's on. She has been promoting wisdom across the faith-based ministries nationally through the Church of God in Christ. And she's done a tremendous job of presenting on our behalf and showcasing the wisdom study at these different conventions across the country. So big shout out to Marion. And
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
she's part of our, she's part of our community leadership board, where we have several other community leaders joining us monthly and joining these calls too. So huge thanks and shout out to Marion and the rest of the community leadership board for playing such an integral role and being our liaisons with the community, and being that trusted voice within those communities we're trying to reach. So yes. All right.
We
With that,
appreciate you.
yes,
Thanks,
we
everybody.
appreciate you. Yes. Thank you,
Very
everyone.
lively. And thank you for all your frank feedback. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep working on it.
My middle name is Frank.
I love it.
Wonderful. All right. Have a
Thank
have
you,
a wonderful evening, everyone. For those in
Okay.
California, stay cool this week, and hope the rest of the country's doing okay too with all the hurricanes and things. So
Yeah.
yes, stay safe and take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.